All right, cool. I'm going to give everyone just a few more seconds to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the 51st Town Hall today. Let's get started. Up first, we have a quick slide from Jared. Jared?
Thanks for being
Yep.
here. You can hear me, right?
Yes,
Cool.
I can.
So I just wanted to say a massive congratulations to everyone. We had status version 1 launched and it went really smoothly. Great feedback from the community. We did a really, really good job. And hopefully the people I'm talking to predominantly here don't hear this because they should be on holiday this week. But all the same, thank you everyone for being involved. In addition to that, I just wanted to give a quick update to the fundraising story. Not much has really changed there. Basically, it's still the two prongs. The 150K ETH that we have, or the other half of the ETH that we have, this is earmarked for user growth, and that's what we're going to be using to reinvest into the S&T economy and drive users to status. So for us to do that, Waku needs to be rolled out, and that's essentially the main dependency. Furthermore, there's a user journey that's being developed, and you can find the user journey through going through the post v1 musings link that's there. But that's pretty much going to be our sort of core focus moving forward. Also in the post v1 musings, there's a bunch of just sort of feedback that I've gotten from various stakeholders, just documenting things there. It's by no means in terms of ordered by priority, but just sort of various ideas that have come up, and then Rachel and Andre can certainly handle the prioritization at least with the application. If there's other things there, just please let me know that you've heard, and I'll make sure that they're documented as well. Yeah, again, just thank you much, everyone. Really, really good launch. Couldn't have asked for it to go better. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Jared. Next, we'll be having a People Ops update. And so first off, we'd like to welcome our new core contributor, Tobias. He is joining the security team with Corey. So please, everyone, make sure that you say hello to Tobias. To the right, you can see the rest of our hiring updates that we have, open roles. So again, always like to mention the referral bonus. If you know anyone, definitely please recommend them for these positions. And then over to you, Carrie.
Yeah, sure. And maybe if we just go back a slide, a bit of context there, you'll see a keycard marketing manager is crossed out. So this will probably make a bit more sense if you have a read through that post v1 musings link that Jared just shared. In terms of like where we see keycard being most effectively marketed and positioned in front of users. So with the thinking around that having changed, it doesn't really make sense at the same time to have a marketing manager specifically for keycard. So yeah, do have a read that doc. I think that will kind of add a bit more context to that. But another thing to mention as well is that we've just made a new hiring channel in the community Discord. And the idea is just to have a place that we can chat to candidates and they can come and ask questions. So far, so good. I think it's quite nice to have that open dialogue. So if any of you out there are thinking about applying, feel free to drop by and chat with our team. Next slide, please. Okay, so Peakon. Thank you. I know you've all been filling out the surveys. The main thing just to mention here is that we haven't yet done a proper implementation with our account manager. So we kind of did a soft launch of this, but I really want to sit with them and figure out, what do we do with the data? How do we best use it? How do we best kind of feed it back to you all? So I think for this point in time, the thing to really mention is that there is a mobile app, which I think makes answering the surveys even easier. If you're into that, feel free to grab it. And also that we will be sharing more information about how do we gather this data, who reads it, what do we do with it, just so that you can kind of see what happens behind the scenes as and when you fill those out. But at any time, you can click that link there and you can see a dashboard that shows the results of the surveys. Yep, that's it.
Thanks, Carrie. Next, we have a security and infra update. First up, we have Corey.
Hey, y'all. So during the V1 launch, we've gotten quite a few answers or quite a few questions in the status and support channel. The process of answering those stuff, I wrote an FAQ of some of the common questions I've gotten and the answers to them. Click on that link to get there. If you see people asking the same questions, point them to that. I'm going to continue to update it over time with all of the kind of questions everyone has on how stuff works, how to do things, etc. I also built a little key util tool for recovering legacy accounts. So if you had status beta and an account created before March 2018, we used a different key derivation algorithm that was not standard. And so if you were to upgrade from that, your accounts will not be the same. So if you need access to that, you can use that little tool to get access to the private key for whatever funds that are associated with that account. I could also derive any HD key path from a seed phrase with another one of the commands if you just want to play around with getting keys out of a seed phrase. Give it a spin there. Always be sure to back up your seed phrase, back up your seed phrase, back up your seed phrase. Can't say it enough. We built a Bitcoin multi-sig wallet to increase security around organizational Bitcoin holdings. So as finance comes up with strategies for holding various assets, we want to make sure that we hold them securely. So we have a Bitcoin multi-sig associated with that. I'm planning a bunch of planning around the public HackerOne security bug bounty program. We're going to relaunch that, make it open to the public, and then start driving anyone with security-related bugs or problems with the application towards that for bug bounties, so we can keep track of that. And that's going to be across the status network. So any part of the status network that wants to contribute or participate in that, let me know. Let's see. Auditors, we're going to have a few requests for proposals coming out in the next few weeks with regards to some of the projects that are at the stage of needing audits. So keep your eye out for that. If you would like to submit a proposal, we'll be happy to add you to the list. And once again, looking forward for Tobias to join the team and start getting some work out of him and increasing the security oversight from all the stuff that we do here. That's all I have.
And go for it, Jakob.
Hello. So, well, of course, we had a lot of changes related to V1. There's been a bunch of different changes on the main status IAM site, including things like downloadings, but as well as documentation updates. So there might be some things here and there that might be just right, but we're still fixing it. There's also been an upgrade to the bridge between Discord and status, which now supports only V1. And the beta will not work. Also, I've just like an hour ago retired the beta fleet, so it won't work anyway. So anyone who is still on beta, please back up your seed phrase, back up your seed phrase, back up your seed phrase, and upgrade. We've also changed the domain name for the service that allows us to link chat names and contacts from get status IAM to join status IAM, because it just reads better. The old links still work, they just redirect to join status IAM. And there's been a bunch of updates there to improve, for example, readability in terms of contacts. So if you link a contact key, you'll see the name or the free word chat name of the person, which makes it easier to identify who's who. And there's also a lot of work with the Nimbus fleet, which has been moved to AWS, and a lot of improvements with their logging research facilities, especially Kibana, and various logging cleanup services. That's the majority of it, really. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Up next, we have ambassadors, and this is with Jinho.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the January 2020 was very productive and meaningful. There were 28 completed tasks in total, and you can find the number of completed tasks by category from the pie chart. Most of our ambassadors contributed to the status network by creating some content. Let's see some examples of their amazing work in the next slide. Next slide, please. One of the blog post that showed very good performance in January was Android Tech 3's building Nimbus on Android. The Nimbus team pushed out a tweet running Nimbus on their smartphones based on the blog post, and the tweet went viral globally, showing unbelievable performance. We even found some articles building Nimbus on Android in Chinese and in Korean as well. Many thanks for his contribution to the status network again. Also, SDH, one of our Korean ambassadors, has been updated the status wiki for the Korean community. It introduced all the aspects of the status network and contains super detailed information on all the projects. The search engine optimization of this wiki is amazing in Korea as well. I cannot believe that it has been done by a single person. On top of that, we've got Italian translation for Status React and the status.im website, thanks to Enrico, TBNR, and Rachid. I'm going to add Italian to the status.im website as soon as some ongoing pull requests are sorted out. And Dawood translate the status.im website and status React into Arabic alone. The website and status React contain more than 10,000 words, but he made it by himself. The ambassadors also helped translate the description and screenshots for V1, which were used on Play Store and App Store. We could successfully include Italian and Arabic on V1 thanks to their contributions. Their translations help more people utilize the secure censorship-resistant features of V1. And Nicholas, ENEVV, made a lot of design assets for status, and he collaborated with other ambassadors making some header images for blog posts and made awesome graphics for the upcoming StickerMkt design competition. An anonymous writer, who is anonymous as it says, put out a blog post on V1 before the V1 release. He explained the value of status as a truly decentralized messenger in detail and what status can do for people across the world. The header images of this blog post were made by Nicholas, as I mentioned before. And Tyler, Crypto Unknown, submitted a pull request to the Status Network website updating some information on Tela and Assemble. And lastly, I'd like to express our gratitude to all the ambassadors who took part in the Status V1 release candidate dogfooding. We could launch V1 successfully thanks to the help of all of you. So huge kudos to all the ambassadors again. Next slide, please. From now on, I'd like to briefly introduce a podcast platform for the Status Network that I'm working on. It contains the audio assets of the Status Network, and you can listen to anything wherever, whenever you want using your desktop or smartphone. Next slide, please. As you can see, there is a list of town hall meetings as well. And if you want to take a look at some slides of a specific town hall, you can just click the view button of the date you want. Next slide, please. So there is an issue with playing HTML5 audio in the background on iOS. So it stops playing the podcast on the lock screens or when you use other applications. I'm gonna make this platform probably after working on this issue a couple of days more. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Junho. Cool update. Next, we have Johnny with a marketing update.
Hey, Johnny. Next slide, please. Yeah, so once again, just wanted to run through some of the numbers of the launch. We call it a soft launch only because it was all organic and owned content. We didn't have any paid, any media. We garnered some like earned media, but this was all just from our own channels. And we're waiting for a larger like PR push once we have some of the scalability issues sorted out with Waku. But on Twitter, this was one of our best pieces of content like ever. Best performing pieces of content. And since the launch last Thursday, our profile visits have gone up 27% and our mentions have gone up 110%. So that's really exciting. Traffic to the Status IM, the website, it blew up. We weren't driving much traffic there before, but since the launch, we had over 5,000 visitors. and almost 12,000 page views, which is crazy, up 213%. So really excited to see that. And once we start driving more traffic from earned and paid, expect to see those numbers go up even more. Also on Reddit, on the Ethereum subreddit, this was one of the trending topics for a week. You can see there the numbers are pretty astonishing. And then we also tested out, well, we've been testing out platforms Blockfolio Signal, which we had 4.8% CTR, which is extremely great. I think previous content had like a 1% CTR, so really good to see that. And then Delta Direct, which is another platform similar to Blockfolio Signal. We don't have the data from that, so I'm chasing that down now, and I'll post it in the thread when we do have that. But once again, congrats to everyone. It was, like Jared was saying, just looking at the comments on social, it was very well received, and kudos to everyone. Next slide. Yeah, so moving past V1, we've got a pretty detailed 2020 strategy outlined here. You can click the link, and then we're trying to break it up into status application marketing, which will focus on the core app and user acquisition, storytelling around the status network, raising awareness for all of the infra dev tools and products. And then Graham and Robin will be working with Yuri and team to really push Embark and driving adoption of the Embark platform. So detailed plans for each one of these areas will be coming, are in that plan, are in that document linked here, and then you'll start to see action items on that this week. Next slide. So here's just a high-level overview of some of the immediate plans we have. I won't go into too much detail because there's a lot here, but we are running a paid pilot just for message testing. We're going to run that across YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit for about 4 weeks, just so we can really hone in on what messages are performing best for our paid acquisition. So we're going to be looking at brand messaging, feature messaging, and like feature specific. So we're going to basically just see which content performs best and gives us a good CTR and CPI. We have a lot of technical content describing the features of the products coming out over the next 2-3 weeks. Robin's been amazing in producing that, working with Rachel and Andre to write that, so expect to see that. Things like breakdown of the tech stack, multi-account, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of brand content going out, really honing in on the privacy and security aspects of status, explaining the feature benefits, the product feature benefits, and all of that. And then Rugi and Andy are working a ton of SMT utility content. So they've got a campaign lined up for the sticker market, which we will announce tomorrow. So pretty exciting, so stay tuned for details around that. Really just trying to drive adoption of SMT and get people using it in status now that we have V1 out. We're working on an event strategy now that the product is out, and we really are just trying to drive user adoption. Events will likely become a bigger part of our strategy. There's a Discuss post just asking if you guys are going to be at, or if anyone's going to be at events. Please let me know so we can support with comms and marketing if it's relevant. And then, like I was mentioning before, the status network has a lot of, we need to kind of explain the tech stack, right? If you look at the infographic on the front page of the town hall slides, like we just want to tell that story in a more clear and concise way. So working with Oscar and Dean on VAC comms, we're going to be pushing out content on Nimbus, supporting them as much as possible, and just trying to explain how it all fits together. And then once again, I won't go into too much detail on it because there's a lot there, but Graham is working on an Embark plan with Yuri. So expect to see a lot more coming out of that team in the next short term. I think that's it. Was there another slide? Oh yeah. So Graham and actually most of the marketing team is going to be in New York this week for a bit of a planning session, and then we're going to be at NFT NYC. It is a big NFT conference here in New York, and as mentioned, so Graham and Rugi are working on an SMT utility campaign. This is kind of a kickstart to that, where we're going to be in front of up to 500 designers and creators, where we're really going to push the sticker market. And Graham's going to be on stage on a panel representing status, talking about what we're doing. And we're also going to kick off a pretty cool campaign competition there as well. So we'll let you know how it goes. I'm really excited about that.
Cool, thanks, Johnny. All right, now we're going to kick it back to Carrie for an Assemble update.
Sure thing. Okay, just a quick one to recap on some of the projects. So at a high level, Assemble right now, it is V1. So we had a few test projects to kind of seed and see how it goes in the platform. And beyond this quarter, then, once we see how it works, what features people are looking for, we can kind of build that out a bit further. So just in general, I think the work to be done on Assemble is kind of figuring out how it best fits into the user flow of people like coming into the status ecosystem, like where and when do they become people that are interested in getting their projects funded? How do we put that in front of them in a way that is like very seamless within the user flow? So those are the big questions to think about. And also within that as well, like, having it be something that's available to our ambassadors as they move through their journey with status. So that's really what we need to figure out. But for the time being, we have the V1. We just wanted to see, okay, like how does it work? Any issues, any bugs? So yeah, here we are with our first few projects, and pleased to say the first couple have got funding, so that's really cool. One was the dApps platform, which is Andy's project, which is the first ever open economic ranking system for decentralized applications, so that's really cool. And the next one was mine and Jinho's ambassador program funding, so that we can then give kind of like micro grants to ambassadors to further their work. And what's really interesting about that actually is that one thing Hester was looking at was actually this is basically a proxy for a delegate function, which is something that we're interested in building in, which is kind of like a pass-through project to fund other projects underneath it. So that's a feature that we hope to build directly into Assemble itself. And then, yeah, a couple of other projects, next slide, please, that are still available. So we have this one here, which is from Graham, and that is to fund DevCon Embark. So that's a newly added project there. And by the way, all of these projects, you can see the join text there. That equates to a channel in status. So if you want to go and chat to the project submitters, you can do that there. Next slide, please. And then the next one up is the StickerMkt Dashboard, which is one in a series of SNT dashboards that has been worked on to kind of give a snapshot of the various SNT utilities that we have. Next slide. One other project here, again, this is posted by an individual not currently in the States network. So here we have Web3 analytics, and as I understand it, it's a Google Analytics alternative. And again, if you have any questions on that, you can contact Marvin directly. There's his email address. And that's it. Yeah, we'll keep updating projects here in these town halls, and head on over to our Assemble channel if you want to chat with our team or check out our roadmap or suggest any changes, anything like that. We'd love to hear your feedback. So thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, next we have a Nimbus update, and this will be given by Zachary.
Hi, the Nimbus team met in Brussels at the beginning of the month after FOSDEM for planning and for. But the highlight of the week actually became the fact that we accidentally launched the first mobile Ethereum 2 testnet. We did this just for fun. We tried to follow the instructions from our ambassador for how to build Nimbus on Android. And each of us was able to install Nimbus on their phone, and we were able to make a small testnet between our phones. And Mami posted a short video of this on his Twitter account, and the reaction was amazing. It quickly became viral. We got a lot of interest from various medias trying to cover the news and so on. So go check it out. But anyway, the point of the meeting was to work and refine our product roadmaps in the many fronts we are now advancing on. This includes Ethereum 1, Ethereum 2, libp2p, and the new project Dagger. And I'll give a very short recap due to lack of time. On Ethereum 1, what we hope to do is to plan our initial public release just in time. So when Ethereum 2 starts to finalize the Ethereum 1 blockchain, there will be a new possibility for the development of very efficient light clients, which use quick and efficient syncing with the Ethereum 2 blockchain, only to obtain a valid crosslink to the latest head block of Ethereum 1. And by having this crosslink, you can cut the time for syncing from the current weeks or hours just to a few seconds. Obviously, a light client will then use Merkle proofs to obtain any other parts of the state. And all of this will work as a more efficient version of the currently becoming popular Beam sync. On the Ethereum 2 front, our goal is obviously having a production launch in perhaps a time frame like 6 months from now. We have been dedicated to work closely with the rest of the implementation teams to we are currently synced with the latest published Ethereum test spec. We are working on implementing and integrating the new Discovery v5 protocol. A lot of work has been going on in making libp2p more stable, and our goal is to replace the current. We're currently using the Gold daemon, but our goal is to replace it as soon as possible with the native NIM libp2p implementation, which we see a very fundamental and core technology for many of the projects that lie in front of status. It would be used by the VAC team, it would be used for our storage project Dagger, and so on. All right, one of the decisions we decided to do after the meeting in Brussels is that since our roadmaps are a bit long-term at the moment, the way they are described, we decided to start publishing shorter terms goal, and we'll do this through GitHub milestones. So you can go check out our initial Ethereum 2 milestone on the Peakon chain GitHub project. And finally, we expect some interesting news in the coming months. Most of the teams, the Ethereum teams, are now getting closer to implementing the same version of the spec for gaining compatibility with each other. And we believe there will be a shared testnet within a month from now. So that's it from me.
Great update. Okay, and up next we have a VAC update from Oscar. Hi, Oscar.
Hi, everyone. Hey. So I'm going to talk a bit about Waku. So our new protocol is going to replace Whisper. Next slide, please. So let's just start with sort of the app. It's currently using Whisper, and it's a protocol that's been around for a while, and not many people are using it. We're one of the main users. And the issue with it is essentially that it doesn't scale very well, specifically for mobile devices. So a few months ago, we made a sort of model on how it scales as the number of users increases in terms of bandwidth usage. So I'm not going to go into detail on how all the sort of factors that play into this, but essentially it's a log graph, and you can see that as you reach maybe 1,000 users and 1,000 users, then for sort of most of these cases here, cases 1 through 7, they sort of show large bandwidth usage. So from sort of 100 megabytes a day, and then it increases quite rapidly up to 10,000 users. So essentially what that means is that for sort of some common assumptions for how the startup is using sort of Whisper as a protocol, it doesn't scale very well. So to solve that, we essentially we sort of looked at the bottlenecks for this, and then we figured out sort of what we call it sort of vacuum mode, where essentially what we do is that we make some adjustments to the Whisper protocol so it scales much better. And you can see that in sort of the 2 lines at the bottom there. And largely it comes down to the fact that if you're a Whisper node, you receive many messages that are not meant for you, and you also receive duplicate messages. So what we do is we sort of find a way around that. Next slide, please. So yeah, it's essentially a fork of the original Whisper protocol, and it's optimized for better usability. And main thing that's new with the Waku protocol is sort of this expressing topic interest. as opposed to using Bloom filters. But there's those other parts that have sort of partly been sort of used in the code base before, but have not been very well specified and understood and so on. So these are things like light node support and mail servers. We have sort of better specs for that and so on now. And then also rate limiting, which is kind of a way of dealing with at least some spam resistance. And the fundamental trade-off here is essentially metadata protection versus scalability. And it's important to point out here that Waku enables everything that Whisper already does. So you can still use and get the sort of same protection as you would with Whisper, but then sort of the scalability, you would quickly run into sort of these scalability barriers. And this is sort of a fundamental feature of how Whisper works. And there's sort of more long-term research in terms of finding a more optimal trade-off between metadata protection and scalability. But with Waku, we sort of lean on the side of actually being able to use it on mobile phones that are mostly offline and are bandwidth constrained and so on. And next slide, please. So where are we right now? We have the latest spec out, 0.3, which has sort of all the necessary components to sort of make this work. It's also been split out and sort of we've made the specs a bit more rigorous, so it's easier to have sort of multiple clients and talk about what each client should support more sort of clearly and so on in terms of interfaces. We have a client both in sort of in Nimbus and status quo, but largely sort of implement 0.3, the latest spec, and you can see more details on what each client supports in the link there. And there's also a bunch of links if you want to click through and learn more. We're still working on some tweaks to sort of make this expressing of topic interest a bit more dynamic and less error prone. So we are sort of, it's a bit of technical details, but essentially we modified the handshake sort of make it more flexible and open-ended. And then we're doing sort of having some symmetry there so we can do the same thing with topic interest as well. We have a simulation that sort of fails to falsify the theoretical model as written in Nimbus. So thanks to Kim for that one. And core integration is currently work in progress in the StickerMkt repo and expected to come into the be released with 1.1 core app release. And if you want to learn more, you can check out the back update post. Next slide. So here's just briefly sort of a summary of one of the simulations that we have. So this is sort of a full mesh topology where you have a bunch of full nodes, and then you have a traditional light node as it worked before in Whisper, and then you have sort of a Waku light node. And what you might notice here is that valid and invalid, those are sort of number of envelopes or messages that you receive. And because of the way Bloom filters work for Whisper with light nodes, you receive a lot more than you sort of, even if you have sort of 10% false positive rate, you receive a lot of sort of messages you don't want. And with Waku light node, we sort of eliminate that. So that leads to a pretty big increase in terms of scalability when it comes to bandwidth. And you can check out the link there as well if you want to know more details. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in terms of what's next, so a lot of the focus has been on sort of this initial bottleneck as identified, which is receive bandwidth for end user clients. And then there's sort of, based on our current understanding, after that, there's very likely going to be a second bottleneck, and that has to do with how you discover nodes. So it's a peer-to-peer network, and you want to discover sort of more nodes that can service you. And if you have a lot of users, that becomes a problem. We have Dean's written a post on DNS-based node discovery that sort of helps address that. And that's something that's sort of slightly different from Waku per se, but it complements it very nicely. And that's something that we are aiming, the core team is also aiming to get into the probably maybe either 1.1 or 1.2. We'll see. I don't want to speak for the core team, but that's roughly the plan right now. And then after that, a very likely bottleneck is in terms of how the sort of fundamental routing works for full nodes in Waku, and which is the same as in Whisper. And this is kind of the routing partition problem. We have some early sort of, we have some ideas around that and some early research and so on, but it's still very early work in progress, but expect to hear more about that in future updates, as well as sort of related problems such as internet validation and spam resistance. And you can see briefly sort of the current estimates on the daily active users that Waku and the Status app should be able to support when it comes to communication. There are also other bottlenecks, but these are the sort of main ones when it comes to actual messaging, as far as we know right now. Next slide. Yeah, and please check out the Waku Dev site. We have a forum and a bunch of updates, and if you want to stay up to date with updates as they come in terms of research and so on. That's it for me. Thank you.
Cool.
Oh, any questions? We can take them as well.
Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, so I definitely would like to open it up for any questions. So anybody, please feel free to go ahead.
Oscar, I have a question on Waku. You mentioned there are potential privacy trade-offs between Waku and Whisper. Can you go into more detail on that? Like, what are some of those trade-offs, and how do you guys plan to remedy that in the future?
Sure. So essentially, the main thing that sort of with Waku, with Whisper, you have this concept of a Bloom filter, and essentially the way it works is that you say that you listen to roughly a bunch of messages that could come in, and what that means is that you receive a bunch of messages that are not for you, and that gives you some kind of plausible deniability, if you will. So in terms of connecting who's talking to who, you sort of leak less information because you're downloading more stuff essentially. With Waku, you could do the same thing, but you probably don't want to do it when you're on a mobile phone. And this is also what traditionally is called sort of darkness in Whisper. It's worth pointing out that this is not kind of a very rigorous privacy guarantee, because it's not something that sort of it's fairly unique to sort of Whisper, and it's not something that other privacy sort of mechanisms use a lot, such as sort of Tor and mixnets and so on. So it's kind of a kind of not there's kind of this trade-off space between number of users and bandwidth usage and sort of metadata privacy, if you will, and it's not in a very optimal spot. So a much better solution for something like that is likely sort of a mixnet such as the one that Nim are working on, and that's sort of the more long-term research path we're taking, where we want to be able to run all sort of our protocols on these sort of more rigorous privacy networks, where you sort of get better guarantees on the actual metadata protection that you get and so on. Another thing that's also worth pointing out is that here we're strictly talking about metadata protection, and that's essentially like knowing who talks to who. And if you compare it to a lot of other apps, they might require a phone number or identify you to a certain sort of your account is identified to a certain person, whereas that's not the case in the Status app at all. So that's a huge difference in terms of privacy for most real world sort of attack surfaces. So it's also a matter of understanding sort of your threat model and what you're guarding against. And essentially the TLDR is that the Whisper one is not super well defined. It's not very rigorous. It's not very well studied. And sort of we think there are better ways to get that kind of what it's trying to get, but sort of more long term. And yeah, we need something that actually scales and works, and then we can sort of have more rigorous guarantees. I don't know if that answers questions, but that's at least directionally.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Great. Does anybody else have a question on what Oscar just presented? All right, then I'm going to stop sharing from YouTube. Oops. 1 second. Stop streaming from YouTube, and then